It is Thursday night in East Lansing, Michigan. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher of SpartanMag.com. Come on in, gather around. Big week for Michigan State sports. It's Thursday night. Last week was New Year's, and before that, Christmas, and then all the holiday hustle and bustle. I hope everybody had a great holiday and off to a great start this new year in 2023. It's been busy. It's the first time out for Spartan Mag Live in a couple weeks because we were so busy out there Christmas shopping and caroling and doing all those things that we do. You know we do that. And I hope you guys had a great holiday season also. It's always holiday season. Football's a holiday too, right? And it's always football season. It's always football season at SpartanMag.com. Go check it out, SpartanMag.com. Give us a thumbs up here. Give us a like. We appreciate that. Subscribe to this channel. We appreciate that also. And if you haven't done it already, go over to SpartanMag.com, the new SpartanMag.com, part of the On3 network. Off to a great start over there. We moved over to On3 on December 1st. And thousands of Michigan State fans have come with us. A lot of those Maggers, high percentage of Maggers. We really appreciate that. You join the fun. Go on over there and become a Magger. And it's only $1. You can subscribe. And it takes you all the way through August 31st. So become a Magger. We really appreciate covering Michigan State for you over there. We got Paul Konyndyk coming in about 20 minutes. We'll be talking about Michigan State versus Michigan basketball. Big one. I think it's 2:30 p.m. Breslin Center, East Lansing, Michigan. Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you've heard of the Michigan Wolverines. They'll be in town. I'm having trouble with the microphone here. It won't. I don't know what the problem is. We'll see what happens. I don't know. Anyway, I was at Michigan State basketball practice today. Tom Izzo press conference. Have video of that here at the SpartanMag.com channel. Check that out. Give that one a like also. Michigan State very intense, but also very focused. They're keeping the line in the cage. Not, they were very measured in their comments today, talking about Michigan. They're respectful. Tom Izzo respectful of Michigan. Didn't name anyone by name. Everybody knows about some of the things going on with Hunter Dickinson. He's been a little bit loose with the lips all season. That's the way he is. That's what Barstool wanted. They're certainly getting their money's worth out of that. And Izzo was not asked specifically about Hunter Dickinson. Malik Hall was asked about it, and he was very complimentary of Hunter Dickinson, Michigan State's excellent center. He is an excellent center. He is a villain. He enjoys playing the villain role, and he will be treated as such by the Breslin Center crowd on Saturday. I'm sure of that. Izzo came out and said that he hopes that it's the. Let me get his exact quote from just a couple of hours ago. You may have heard it. Nothing too controversial, but it was interesting. I'm not sure that Michigan State fans totally will abide by what he's calling for. Part of it they will. He says. Izzo says, I tell you what I expect, and I hope. He says, I hope we are the craziest, toughest, best crowd that ever was assembled in Breslin. He wants the craziest, toughest, best crowd ever. I think Michigan State fans will answer that call and be in pretty good form on a Saturday afternoon, mid-afternoon. He says he wants it to be, quote, with class, with respect, and handling ourselves the way we should. That's the way I'm going to play this game. That's the way I'm going to handle this game. He said, I'll say this to every Michigan State fan. He says it better not be bad. He was asked if he thinks some of the, some of the ill will that took place during the football game back in late October, whenever it was, if any of that would carry over to basketball. And he says, I'll say that it better not be carrying over. He says, because on this side of the state, it better be done this way, he said. Cheer for us, respect your opponent, and let's play the game, unquote. Do you agree with that? Respect your opponent. He's asking for that. That's the way Izzo was brought up. That's the way a lot of us were brought up in the Midwest. It's not that way anymore. I mean, I'm an old guy yelling at the clouds. I've talked about this before. Back in the old days, you respected your opponent. In the 1990s, when some teams started making trash talking fashionable, it was kind of new. There was not a lot of that in sports. I mean, there was under the breath here and there. That's always been part of the game. But in terms of letting everyone know that you're belittling an opponent, it's kind of a new thing in the Midwest anyway. I don't know if you'd agree with that. That's my perception. It became a new thing in the 90s. Izzo's old school, like a lot of you are. So trash talking, especially if you're winning, is not something that's been part of his lexicon. So he said, quote, is there going to be any love? Hell no, he says. He says, but I've said that for 20 years, and there won't be any love the other way either. He says, will there be respect? From this side, there will be. and that's the way I want our fans to handle it. But I want them to spend a lot more time cheering for Michigan State than worrying about the other school, unquote. I wonder what you think about that. Go ahead and post over in the comments area. We'd like to hear from you over there. I got to get this thing set up so I can see what the comments are. I can't... got a little bit of a situation here. Where are the comments? There they are. Looks like everything is going good. Looks like you can hear me. Looks like we're off to a pretty good start. Konyndyk will be calling in to talk about Michigan State basketball here soon. We've got some football questions. And questions were posed over at the Underground Bunker message board. That is the premium message board over at SpartanMag.com. I invited Michigan State fans to post questions there. I will be fielding those questions here as part of tonight's edition of Spartan Mag Live. You got the Michigan State Spartans 10-5, 5 straight wins. And the University of Michigan Wolverines, what are they, 9-5, something like that, coming off 2 pretty good wins against Maryland and Penn State. Very good at home, both of those games. Now Michigan goes on the road. Let's go to the mailbag. The first question pertains to that game coming up on Saturday. It's from Jake from Troy, Michigan. He says, what do you see that has changed for Michigan basketball? He says apparently they had a team meeting before the Maryland game, and since then they have looked solid. Well, I think Michigan's always had it in them. They've got talent. Everybody knows that. Dickinson's one of the best centers in America at 7'1" with good skill to either shoulder. He's hard to deal with. And, he mixes in some medium range or some face-up. And he's a bull in the china shop. When he's got it going on, it's difficult. Jet Howard, I think Howard looks like could be an NBA player, right? They had the injury of the point guard. That upset them a little bit in, late December or so. But they've always had it in them. They played Kentucky tough. Over in England, they played North Carolina tough. Not that North Carolina is great, but they played them tough. They played Virginia very tough. Virginia's been ranked in the top 5. I'm not sure they're that good, but that's not bad. They played someone else pretty tough, too. Can't remember who the other one was. Were blown out by Arizona State. Lost to Central Michigan. Struggled with other teams. But when they've gone against good teams, they've been able to tune up a little bit and play competitive, good basketball. So it's not a big surprise, in my opinion, that they went ahead and blew out Maryland. Maryland had crept up to number 13 in the country earlier in the season. And then Penn State's been pretty good, and Penn State had some moments against Michigan, but Michigan controlled that game throughout, looked pretty good. So what has changed? Not much. I think they've always had the capacity to play good basketball against good teams, and they're going to be dialed in against Michigan State this weekend. We'll talk a little bit more about that matchup with Konyndyk here in about 17 minutes. Izzo was talking about Michigan's a little bit today, and he says something that's gotten better. He mentioned Terrence Williams, a 31% three-point shooter for the season, has shot better the last couple of games. And also the transfer from Duke, Baker. You may remember him when Joey Baker, when Michigan State played Duke in the past. He was a support player for them, averaging 14 minutes a game, but he had, 3 three-pointers last night against Penn State. Had a three-pointer on a sideline out-of-bounds play. Also off a horns rolled space play. He's shooting well. I mean, Baker comes off the bench, gives him a couple threes, makes everything that much better. And Penn State kept making runs at them, so those shots that Baker made a difference. The shots that Terrence Williams made a difference. When those guys are complementing things, it's a lot better. So the Central Michigan game, they were sleepwalking. I'm sure they were all full of themselves, thinking they were good or something. And they got what they deserved, because they could have lost to Eastern Michigan, could have lost to Ohio, struggled with Lipscomb. They deserved to lose one of those games. That's what Bob Knight would say. That's what Tom Izzo would say. I'm not sure Juwan Howard would say that, but they got what they deserved there. Bounce back. Now we'll see what they can do at Breslin against Michigan State. Question number 2, Hayden V8 from Grand Rapids. He says, not really a football or basketball question, more so mag related. He says, in your opinion, what are the 3 most memorable days, events on the message boards in Spartan Mag history? That's a deep thinker. I probably should have slid this down later in the show. And I'd have to think about that for a while. You guys go ahead and post what you think if you've got any ideas or if you have any memories. SpartanMag.com, going back to the late 1990s. Some of your favorite message board moments. I think Mateen Cleave's commitment would have been the biggest if the message board had been around back then, but that was 1995. We were kind of getting off the ground at that point, but didn't quite have the following. One that I remember is in February of 2008, signing day, when Mark Ingram, who looked like a Michigan State commitment for quite a while, not 100%, but it looked good, committed to Alabama on signing day. The message board was really flipping out that day. It was not a happy signing day night. I remember it also because I was in Florida on a Disney vacation. You know how it is. The wife says, "Hey, let's go on vacation this week," and I'm busy. I'm like, "Yeah, sure, sounds great." Working on something. I didn't realize that was signing day week, so I didn't go to the signing day press conference. And Konyndyk covered for me, did a great job. People that were wondering, like I think John Lewandowski, who was sports information director at the time, I said I was sick. I'm out sick. And Lewandowski was like, "Man, he must have really been sick to miss signing day." No, dude, I was in Florida. First time I've really divulged that. So when all that was going down with Ingram decommitting, and I was talking to Konyndyk and Matt Dorsey on the phone. Back then we didn't have smartphones. I didn't have my laptop down in Florida. I had no access to the internet. I could have there at the hotel somewhere, but I really, kind of had an idea what was going on, but I was not in the middle of it. It's my understanding it was a complete meltdown, and rightfully so. Mark Ingram, a Flint player, he was a good prospect. Nobody knew he was going to win a national championship and a Heisman Trophy and run roughshod over Michigan State in his last game as a Crimson Tide player. So that was kind of a crossroads moment. And, sometimes things in the message board, there's overreaction, and there was tremendous reaction on that night to him committing to Alabama. And I'm wondering, was he a decommitment? I can't remember if he'd committed to Michigan State or if he was considered I know he was at least a silent commitment to Michigan State. But the reaction was nuclear for Michigan State fans on the message board. And 4 years later, that reaction was justified. We didn't know the guy was a Heisman Trophy winner at the time, but considering what he became, that reaction was justified. So I remember that one in not a good way. Let's go to question number 3. Nick from Bentonville, Arkansas. And I invite other people to put out their longtime Spartan Maggers, your most memorable moments on the Underground Bunker message board. I'll also say, when the COVID thing was coming down 2 years ago, and we didn't know where that whole thing was headed. And, I don't know if you remember, it was kind of scary there a little bit. And, no one knew what was going to happen with the economy even, right? And Spartan Maggers, they eventually had their differences of opinion, as everybody did in the country. But, there for a while, it was a touchstone. It was a place for people to come back, and gather and, trade stories and trade observations from various parts of the country, if not the world. I thought Spartan Mag, it was a challenge to keep, everybody in tune out there on recess. But I was kind of proud the role that the message board played with a lot of people that had various different ways of having to cope with that whole situation. Anyway, question number 3, Nick from Bentonville, Arkansas. He says, most of us were expecting some coaching changes from the Michigan State football staff this offseason. This is Nick from Bentonville, Arkansas. He says, we got one change yesterday, but he was highly regarded. Talk about Marco Coleman, Michigan State's defensive line coach, leaving Michigan State to become defensive line coach at Georgia Tech. That happened yesterday. Nick from Bentonville, Arkansas says, it's not really the change we were expecting. I don't know who we is. Nick has a mouse in his pocket, apparently. But he says, is this it for coaching exits, or do you expect more? If you do expect more, what's the most reasonable timing that those exits would take place? And Nick, I was just joking with you a little bit. You can probably take it. But is that it for coaching changes? I don't know, because Mel Tucker has not told me, and he's not going to tell anybody. Do I expect more? Wouldn't shock me, but, Tucker was pretty forthright on signing day when he said there was not going to be any changes, but he was not going to prevent others from looking around. And then we saw a coach look around and leave. You ask, what's the most reasonable timing that those exits would take place? Reasonable timing is right now, because the coaches convention is taking place right now. It always takes place the week of the national championship game. The coaches all go and they meet at some locale, some destination in a warm weather place. And they do it right now. That's why this is a dead recruiting period. They don't have any recruiting going on because they want all coaches to be in the convention. or the coaches themselves want to be at the convention, networking and so forth. So if it's going to happen, it would come real soon, coming out of the convention, or as was yesterday during the convention. So it would happen right now. Am I expecting any other ones? I mean, if Michigan State had a really great year in terms of pass rush, there'd be a lot of schools coming after Brandon Jordan. There's probably some talk about that. Michigan State will have to, if Michigan State had a great year in pass rush, which they started out that way, but it didn't really sustain itself throughout the course of the season, partly because of injuries and attrition and so forth. But at some point, there's going to be a lot of schools coming after him, I would think. He's had an impact recruiting-wise in Louisiana and Texas. Not so much out of that area, though. If he starts having more of an impact recruiting-wise, he'll become even more attractive and maybe harder to hold on to. But right now, I don't have any insight on coaching changes because, Mel Tucker's not going to call me up and let me know. He's not going to call anyone up. I mean, these are family matters. When you let a coach go, you are having a big impact on that coach's wife and kids. So it's not like he's going to be over at the country club telling people, yeah, I think I'm going to fire this coach and that coach and that coach. I mean, sometimes there are in various coaching staffs around the country, there can be a falling out, and you might hear about things that way. But, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State, that Michigan State has critiqued everything, and the season was not a great season. 5-7, injuries had something to do with it, but there were other problems as well. Could they look in another direction in terms of special teams? Possibly, but I've not heard anything, nor would I expect to hear anything there. You'll know when I know. Question number 4, Ben from Gobles, Michigan, which he points out is Tyler Hunt's hometown. He says, how concerned are you in losing our defensive line coach? Parentheses, can't remember his name. So Ben from Gobles must not be too concerned because he can't remember Marco Coleman's name. Again, Ben, I kid because I care. You can handle it. I'm just joking. How concerned? I thought Marco Coleman did a pretty good job at defensive line this year. Michigan State had a lot of problems with attrition and injuries, and I thought D-line remained pretty solid. And when they had to move defensive tackles out to defensive end out of emergencies, it held together okay. Really well against Illinois, but then the lack of lateral movement came back to haunt them against the run against Rutgers a little bit, and then several things went wrong against Indiana. Not much you can do with defensive tackles playing defensive end, but defensive tackles were good, as expected, even with Jacob Slade being banged up for a good portions of the year. Keith Bogle injured in game number 4 or 5, I think it was, game 4. Was not going to be a great pass rusher, but he was good against the run and good straight line speed to the outside. Jeff Pietrowski pretty much out for the year. Missed him. He was supposed to start. I thought he had potential to be a 7 or 8 sack man on the year, and they could have used that. Zion Young came along and played pretty well, and he was involved in the tunnel incident. Brandon Wright was functional. There's a lot of talk about him in the spring and in August. He was okay. He was a guy. Then he was lost in the tunnel incident. So a lot of attrition there when you're losing 4 of your top 5 at defensive end. Bogle, Pietrowski, Zion Young, Brandon Wright, kind of top 5. So Fletcher had to come around. Michael Fletcher, now he's headed where? Appalachian State. He was functional. He was okay. So, Michigan State had some pretty good depth there, considering all the attrition that they had, to just plug in Deshaun Mallory and Michael Fletcher and kind of get away with it. They were not terrible. They were okay. Which I give them credit for being okay. They're gone now in the portal. I don't think Deshaun Mallory is hooked up anywhere yet. Chase Carter, the freshman from Minnesota, joined the portal. And I kind of thought maybe he had something lined up, but apparently not, because he's out on social media reminding people, hey, this is what I look like before and after. I don't know if you saw that, but he tweeted out a before and after picture, and he looked better, saying that he had 4 years of eligibility left. Like, he's really trying to get some attention. That's the way it came off to me. There's a lot of people in the portal. Mel Tucker was talking on signing day that there are 4,000 people in the portal. That's not football players. I think he means 4,000 athletes in all sports in the portal, because there's only 119 teams. It's not like every team is going to have 30 players in the portal, or whatever the math would be on that. Yeah, 33 players in the portal. That's not happening. But it is it's a buyer's market out there. There's a lot of players, not a lot of great ones, but there's a lot of Chase Carters. So Chase Carter might have thought there'd be a lot of takers, and maybe there still will be, but nothing yet. All right. So he's asking, how concerned am I for Michigan State about the defensive line situation? I liked Marco Coleman, and I'm sure Michigan State wanted to hold on to him. Goes back to Georgia Tech, his alma mater. They had a coaching change at Georgia Tech. He gets to go back to a warm weather climate to play in, recruit in, to live in. I think that meant something to him. I think that was kind of a surprise for Michigan State. I don't think Mel Tucker was surprised. He probably knew about it. But others, it was a surprise. So Kevin Vickerson is there. That's where Michigan State's in good shape in some ways, because Kevin Vickerson has been a graduate assistant at defensive tackle, I think, for 3 years now. And he's overqualified as a graduate assistant. This is a guy that played 13 years in the National Football League, retiring in 2015. Took some time off in 2016-17, was around the program a little bit, then hooked up with Tucker in 2020, shortly after Tucker got the job. He's been a GA. He's been really well received by the players as a defensive tackle coach. There's only so much that he can do as a GA, an analyst, or whatever role he had. But he has a wealth of knowledge. He knows how it's done at the state-of-the-art level of defensive tackle. He was in the league just 5 years ago. Well, 8 years ago now, 2015. But he's really respected by the players. The players want more coaching from him. So Vickerson is at least ready to be a defensive tackle, full-time on-field coach. And Vickerson has a lot of ties in Detroit, and during recruiting visits on campus for what he can do within the rules and so forth, he's had his ear to the ground pretty good on those things. I think he's ready to be a full-time assistant. And if Michigan State does not hire him, I think, he's at least going to do something in the MAC, if not better. He's overqualified for that too. I mean, do you want him going to Kentucky or some other place? Because that's what's going to happen. So timing-wise, I think Vickerson was ready to move on, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's looking to move on. So Coleman leaves, you can keep Vickerson. Now, is Vickerson ready to coach the entire 4-man defensive line group? It's a good question. I'm not qualified enough to know that, but he's at least qualified to be a defensive tackles coach. And I think he's proven himself in terms of professionalism and everything within the program, recruiting and all those things, as far as I can tell. So if they do hire him, I think that'd be a good one. I don't know everything that's going on behind the scenes and everything. So BT Jordan is pass rush coach. That does not make him defensive ends coach. So can Vickerson coach all 4 the way Coleman did? Yeah, I think he can. So I think he's right in there. And, Amos from Perrysburg, Ohio asks the same question. What are my thoughts on Vickerson to replace Coleman? I just gave you my thoughts on that. So, there have been other coaches. I was trying to think, some other coaches that have been ready and then moved on, and then you end up regretting it a little bit. Someone mentioned about Archer Collins out of Pittsburgh, but I'm not necessarily thinking about him. And he's a good coach, I think, and they've done well there. Yeah, I can't think. It seems like there's been someone that moved on. Anyway, yeah, I think, Vickerson, 13 years in the NFL, a couple years here in the program, Detroiter, Michigan State player. He knows the landscape. He's a hungry Spartan dog. He's overqualified right now to be a GA. That's all I can say. Question number 5, Tony from Northville says, what's the likelihood that Andrell Anthony ends up in East Lansing as a Michigan State Spartan? He says he showed some serious speed on that 93-yard touchdown last year in Spartan Stadium. Just curious to hear your thoughts. It's a good question. Andrell Anthony, Michigan wide receiver. Entered the transfer portal a couple weeks ago, or a week ago. And I think Michigan State offered him this week, like a day ago. He's been getting a lot of offers. Michigan State's offer is interesting. It speaks some volumes there because they obviously feel that they still have a good relationship with him. Michigan State made a good, strong, hard run at him during the COVID year. Michigan State at one point thought they were in good position to get him. He grew up a Michigan fan, went to Michigan. Has had some moments, but it's not completely worked out well there. He's looking elsewhere. That's obvious. So Michigan State offering shows some interest. So I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State gets in the top 3 for him. I don't know who else I've not heard, but you're asking me what are the chances? I'm saying there's a chance. I wouldn't say there's more than a 50% chance, but I've got my ear to the ground on that. I've got some questions out to people around town that knew him a little bit or close to recruiting to try to get some vibes and some smoke screens on that whole deal, but it certainly is interesting. Now let's go over here to the comments area. Appreciate everybody coming in on a Thursday night, checking us out. I think I just lost something there. Got Hayden Vischer. He's in here first saying Happy New Year. Marlo says go white. It's good to have Marlo here. I posted up Marlo the other day on the board. You know I love you, Marlo. He was kind of posting up my guy Konyndyk a little bit. I got to protect Konyndyk. You know that. MSU Hunter Spartan says Happy New Year, checking in from central Wisconsin. Is that the driftless area of Wisconsin? Eric M. says Happy New Year from Roswell, Georgia. MSU Hunter Spartan says Spartan basketball needs to get it done Saturday. And Bruce Cameron Jr. says go green. I think it's the first time that Bruce Cameron Jr. has been in the starting lineup. We're going to give him the ball, let him run the point. We got Hayden Vischer. He's a sweet shooting 2-guard. Marlo, man, he's got those sharp elbows. I got him on the block, stretching out as a stretch 4. Just busting people up, stepping outside, draining, and talking trash back up the court. MSU Hunter Spartan, he's in the middle. Eric M. is our small forward. Do people still say small forwards? Am I dating myself with that one? It's positionless these days, right? Mike Wynn says Muhammad Ali started all the trash talking we see today. Interesting observation. Never thought of it that way. Mike Wynn says there was only one Ali. Desert Spartan says Michigan is a good team. This game will not be easy. I agree. George Page says, hey, Comp, no coffee mug tonight. I got a coffee mug. Got it right there. Check it out. There's your coffee mug. My favorite coffee mug is a green coffee mug, but it messes up with my green screen. I can't use it here. It's a green one that says up north, but I can't use it because of the green screen. But I got this one, the old Ensemble Fly Shop. Very nice place to stop off at on I-75. Head north. Not an advertiser. But those of you at the old Ensemble Fly Shop in Grayling, send me some stuff. Let me know when to stop by. We'll do a SpartanMag Live from right there. When does trout season start? April 15th, tax day, something like that? Old Ensemble Fly Shop. We'll do SpartanMag Live from the trout shop. Yes, we will. Let me know, guys, at the old Ensemble Fly Shop. Or over there at Rusty Gates' place. We'll do it from the banks of the Ensemble River right there from Gates Lodge. Had breakfast there. Was that this summer? Outstanding. Nice pictures on the wall. Great place. On a hot day, that river is just cool. You don't want to hit the trout too hard when it's hot, though. They're under a lot of pressure. I was going to say a couple other things, but I won't. All right, George Page. But anyway, thanks for checking in, George. And George, I've been talking to you about that February about George Page, by the way, former guitar player and keyboard player for Surrender Dorothy, one of the top 25 East Lansing bands of all time. And we talked about FebFest coming up 2023. I've been talking about that with some people. My brother-in-law, I don't know if he's going to be available, so that we might have to change that to 2024. I don't know. I don't know, George, if that messes up Surrender Dorothy reunion plans. I gotta check with my other people to see if it's all in line. We might be too old to do it every 12 months. We might just have to do it on election years. I don't know. On even numbered years. I'm not sure. I'll let you know soon, though. But anyway, appreciate you checking in, George Page. And we got Don Strait. Don Strait. Straight out of DeWitt, ladies and gentlemen. And appreciate Don Strait with a personal sponsorship of the tip jars for SpartanMag. Appreciate that, Don. Don says, Pope, what has surprised you about Michigan State hoop, and what do you think the ceiling is? If you have time to talk about the Michigan if you have time, talk about Michigan versus TCU. Surprised me about Michigan State basketball. From the very beginning, Matty Sissoko against Gonzaga in Kentucky. And then he's leveled out. Now he's going to be facing Dickinson. So Sissoko needs to harness that level of himself from early in the season and be physical and active and have a good competitive day against one of the best centers in the country. Sissoko has to stay out of foul trouble. We talked about this in the VCast after the game at Breslin Center 2 nights ago when Michigan State played Nebraska. Sissoko had some early contact against Nebraska, was not called for fouls. I'm not saying there should have been fouls, but on other nights with other officials, those could have been whistles and could have changed that game. If he gets in foul trouble in this game, whether it be Kohler or Carson Cooper, Michigan State would be in big trouble trying to guard Austin Dickinson without Sissoko. So Sissoko's fouls are very valuable in this game. So on one hand, he has surprised me. Jaden Akins' three-point shooting has surprised me. He's comfortably above 40%. He was 1 of 5 the other night against Nebraska, but prior to that, he was up around 70%. He's not going to stay a 70% shooter. Not even Steph Curry could shoot 70%. But that left-handed jumper is looking good. Looked good today in practice. We knew Akins was a great athlete, capable of becoming a really good defensive player, good kid, team-oriented. I kind of had him as more of a streak shooter, maybe progressing toward becoming a good shooter later in his career. I didn't think he'd be this good of a shooter this early. So that has raised Michigan State's ceiling. Joey Hauser, having lost 10 pounds, how he's moving so much better. I saw that in the summer in early season practices. I wasn't sure how it would translate to the court. I figured he'd be better, but he's a little bit better than I expected. He was just kind of okay there for a couple years, and his struggles were well documented. But because he's a little lighter, he's moving his feet, lateral movement a lot better. It's made him a better defensive player. I didn't necessarily think that would translate to better rebounding. What does he have, 5 double-doubles now? And he's become a consistent 40+% three-point shooter at 6'9", which creates problems for a defense. And it's like you can expect him to go 2 for 5 every day. It's not like he goes 4 for 6 one day and 0 for 6 the next. I mean, he lines it up and gets it done. That's valuable. And it's making Michigan State more difficult to guard when he's out there floating around on the perimeter. And he moves quickly when getting to his spots, popping out on the roll replace or whatever the case may be, just spacing out into the corner. He gets out there quickly. And that stretches out a defense because you have to get that out there on him. And that opens up lanes. And when you have Hogard and Walker out there, 2-point guards who can drive, and Akins is getting better at it, Michigan State, if they get all of their crap together, can be quite good. And everybody knows that when Michigan State is good and they go into March, there's not a coach in the country that wants Michigan State in their bracket in March. And that included Mike Krzyzewski last year. Michigan State was beating Duke by 5 with 5 minutes to go, and Izzo was that close to retiring Krzyzewski. Not that he has any animosity toward Mike Krzyzewski, but it would have been fitting for Michigan State to retire him. Michigan State had trouble with Duke. It's also had some memorable victories over Duke, including the big upset of the Zion Williamson team in the Elite Eight in Washington, D.C. back in 2019. But if Izzo had retired Krzyzewski, that would have just been another notch for Izzo because he retired Tarkanian, retired Rick Majerus, retired Don Chaney. Was there another one? Nothing against those guys, no ill will, but it was that close. So, Michigan versus TCU. I posted about TCU today over at the Underground Bunker message board looking into their transfer portal success. I want to take a little deeper look into, how they've gotten that done. The defense, it's not like, TCU's defense was good when it needed to be good. They still gave up, 450 yards because Michigan was in comeback mode the whole game. Still give up 45 points or whatever it was. But taking a closer look at the transfer portal, Johnny Hodges, the linebacker from Navy, 6'2", 240, getting a lot of notoriety, getting a lot of publicity this week, and deservedly so. A guy that went to Navy as a lacrosse player. You know the story by now. Watching Hodges and Winter, those two inside linebackers, they play deeper. They're a little deeper than most linebackers in that 3-3-5. and I'd have to watch it again. But it's a 3-3-5. But when Michigan would have one back and one or two tight ends, it was more of a 3-4. But you didn't know who the fourth was going to be. That was kind of a moving picture with the three safeties, like who's going to be the fourth one. So it can be difficult for an offensive lineman and an offensive line group to get on the same page. And those linebackers are quick, and they were smart. You know, when there was a little opening, if a guard was pulling or zone blocking, I mean, they would charge from a backside gap and get to a ball carrier before he turned the corner. Good, fast running backs, to the point where Michigan was kind of giving up on conventional run plays in short yardage. And that's the main thing about this game, and I posted that in the Underground Bunker message board. And I'm looking at it because, I mean, Michigan's interesting for obvious reasons, but every year in the college football playoff, everybody really focuses on those games. And I really do, too, because it's state-of-the-art football. Okay, who are the best? How do they get there? What are they doing every year? And I was disappointed that ESPN changed their megacast. I used to like to watch the coaches watch the game. I've got it recorded. I heard that they did get into some X's and O's. I heard Kubelik did. Now, Taylor Lewan was part of it, and he's just a buffoon. I mean, he's a very good football player and everything, but, he's been known to say terrible things on the field that should get him canceled. But I don't use that word a lot, but when Golston took a swipe at him, Golston ended up getting in trouble. Anyway, so I watched it for like 30 seconds, and I couldn't stand it because it just seemed like buffoonery to me. Is buffoonery a word? I don't know, but it seemed like buffoonery, and I was disappointed because they don't have, I'd rather see four coaches breaking it down and watching, and that's what I usually would watch when the playoff was going on. I'd watch it with the megacast, and I'd rewind and listen, go back to it, and I'd spend like 6 or 7 hours on each game. But now they've gone to these people on the field, guys that played. Kubelik is serious, and RG3 had other things going on, which I respect. But apparently Cole Kubelik got into some X's and O's during that thing, so I'd like to go back and see what he had to say about it. But it's different. It's unconventional the way they do their 3-3-5. And behind that, the linebackers, I don't know if you want to call it instinctive linebackers, or I used to call it linebacking knack, but those the 30 front, those guys are two gapping, so linebackers are responsible for two gaps. So they've got to make a decision. They're making decisions right now, and they're correct decisions. Gone. And threw it and tackling the guy before he gets out. Now, I realize it was a different staff, but when Gary Patterson was at TCU, when they beat Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl, it was similar, and I think there was a 4-2-5 back then. What was the guy's name? Tank Carter or something like that, the middle linebacker for TCU back then. And when Wisconsin tried to run power or outside zone, they were just like charging in through daylight and tackling the thing before it turned the corner. Wisconsin eventually started having success with power and went down and scored. And if that game would have went 5 more minutes, Wisconsin was in the process of taking that game over. But I know it was a different coach, different scheme, but it was still TCU. And that's similar to what TCU did to keep a very, very good Wisconsin ground attack bottled up that year. That was the year Michigan State played Alabama in the Outback Bowl or Citrus Bowl, whatever that was called back then. So TCU doing that, undersized, as everyone knows, although, Hodge was a big guy at 6'2", 240. He's a big middle inside linebacker. I don't know, it's kind of a cop-out, but, I mean, they got it done that day with, 3-3-5, undersized in some areas, but two very good corners and guys that could tackle. Those linebackers had knack, and also they defeated blocks. They would get there with quick feet and take on half a man and defeat blocks and get where they're supposed to be. Smart and quick. I don't know if they could do it week after week after week with a really tough schedule in the Big Ten. I know the Big 12 was pretty good, but it's a little different style of football. It's not as freewheeling as it used to be. But I think that TCU will not. I think the Tigers might have a little less tread here playing 9 days later against Georgia, doing it 2 weeks in a row. But man, it was really interesting to watch them play. So Hodges brought him in from Navy, and I was talking to Nils about this. There was an article, I think, in The Athletic about it, but SMU, when Sonny Dykes was at SMU, they played Navy, and they were impressed with Hodges when they played him. So when Hodges went in the portal, TCU went after him, and TCU was the only Power 5 school that showed interest. Why did they show interest? Because they'd coached against him. I didn't know that when I posted earlier today. I was like, wow, they're just like turning over every stone and found a gem there in Hodges. And then, Mark Perry, a safety from Colorado, comes in, ends up being the number 2 tackler on the team. University of Colorado, he was a Mel Tucker recruit at the University of Colorado back in 2019. He goes in the portal. TCU picks him out. He's not a star, but he ends up number 2 tackler on the team. John Newton was a corner from Louisiana Monroe. He was a native of Monroe, Louisiana. Ends up number 3 on the team in snaps played on defense with 910. So those 3 first-year transfers had a big impact, and the coach for TCU, Dykes, said that they couldn't have done what they did without doing what they did in the portal. So it's a big part of what they did. They got it right this time. Can they sustain it that way? I don't know. But there's college coaches and athletic department officials all over the country saying, can we do that? Can we do what TCU did? Well, they were well coached on defense. I posted about that today also. First-year defensive coordinator Joe Gillespie. He was a guy that was defensive coordinator at University of Tulsa back when they played Michigan State in 2019. I posted about that today. Michigan State beat Tulsa 28-7 that year, and I remember Michigan State had a lot of trouble with Tulsa. They only averaged like 2.5 yards per carry, and Michigan State rushed it 40 times for like 108 yards. And Lewerke kind of had a mediocre day, and Tulsa just like stopped Michigan State that day, and they were strange. They were uncommon with what they did. Essentially, they had a 30 front. I assume it was a 3-3-5. I don't know, but it was a 30 front, and they either blitzed everybody wholesale, 0 blitz, or they rushed 3 and dropped 8. It was like all or nothing. And I'd never seen a team that was all or nothing like that. And they kept Michigan State contained. Michigan State had a defensive touchdown and a safety for 9 points and kicked 4 field goals. Michigan State scored a touchdown, I think, in the opening drive and really didn't do anything on offense the rest of the day. And I was like, man, this Tulsa thing, they're different. And I saw them play like later that year, and the next year I saw them maybe in a bowl game during COVID or something, and I watched them again just because I remembered how different they were. And it was one of those teams, those mid-major teams where they do something peculiar, and you're like, man, I want to keep my eye on that team. That team might have something. Kind of like when Santangelo was here with Gonzaga back in 1997. Gonzaga, they kind of have something there. Bucknell basketball should have beaten Michigan State that year. Who the hell's Bucknell? I think Bucknell was like 6 out of 20 from the free throw line that night. Otherwise, Bucknell would have beaten Michigan State in Breslin. Bucknell, who the hell's Bucknell? Wow. 3 months later, they're beating Kansas in the NCAA tournament. Lehigh. Who's the guy they had in the NBA now? Lehigh gave Michigan State fits. 4 months later, they're beating Duke in the NCAA tournament. So sometimes those teams come in here and you're like, who the heck is it? Well, all right, Tulsa was that way for me with what they did on defense, just because it was different. And they had some success a little bit the next year and the year after. And then Gillespie gets hired by Sonny Dykes. So credit to Sonny Dykes. He's been pushing some buttons here and there. Yeah, give me that inside linebacker from Navy. Give me that coach from Tulsa who coached high school football in Texas for 20 years. First-year defensive coordinator at the FBS level, and he's out here running this 3-3-5 and doing some unique things with it. So you asked me about Tulsa, I probably went too long, or you asked me about TCU, I might have went a little bit too long on that. But Tulsa, TCU, of course Michigan's going to complain about officiating and everything because that's the way they are. And that's the way their little echo chamber and sewing circle and circle jerk is for Michigan fans. That's how they greet each other, is complaining about officiating. If they would have called that touchdown early in the game, the one that, I don't know, they probably still would have found a way to lose, probably. Michigan was very good, but, I heard earlier in that week they were talking about, somebody from Michigan was saying that they've never been so focused in their lives. No one's talking, like on the bus rides to the stadium for practice, there's not a word being said. I heard that, and I'm like, I don't know if that's a good thing. Sometimes you can get so focused you get tight, and they looked a little tight to me, fumbling. And then Harbaugh getting in there, trying to prove that he's the smartest man in the room with a little short handoff to the fullback, fumble. Kind of outsmarted himself on that one. People said the same thing about Philly special. The problem is Michigan was not good in short yardage on offense or defense in that game. TCU owned short yardage. And if you own short yardage, that's some big steps toward winning the game. TCU tackled better than Michigan. tackled better than Michigan. Michigan had 4 or 5 tackles get out for extra yardage in key situations, especially early in the game when TCU was building the big lead. TCU tackled better, and they're better in short yardage. So you can cry about officiating, but go back to the drawing board and try to carve out some Schembechler things that allow you to be better in short yardage and in tackling. But Michigan was the best team in the Big Ten this year for the most part. Ohio State played great against Georgia. Ohio State's the best team in the Big Ten in a neutral environment, in a controlled environment, in an NFL stadium. Ohio State's the best team in the Big Ten. But not a great cold weather team, as they showed against Northwestern. Credit to the Buckeyes for showing up and playing really well that day. I think overall it showed that the Big Ten could compete with Georgia. And overall, Michigan, I think Michigan beats TCU 6 times out of 10 probably. I think we were close to seeing an all Big Ten national championship game, which would have just freaked everybody out in the South. I didn't know that the Big Ten was that close to doing that this year. I never would have thought that in July. I wasn't surprised. I'm not surprised that Ohio State kind of had I don't want to say mediocre season, but they were never that great, except when they played Michigan State, it seems. So I'm not surprised they continued to have an engine that wasn't quite hitting on all cylinders. But between Michigan and Ohio State combined, they show that the Big Ten, the top of the Big Ten, is not as far behind the SEC as it was 12 months ago and 24 months ago and 36 months ago. I think Penn State's pretty good too. And Penn State's been recruiting well, and they got a lot coming back. My guy Konyndyk was supposed to call. I'm not sure what's going on. It didn't. Okay. Here it is. I had it off. My bad. Try again, please. I had it turned off. Paul's not surprised. So we'll hear from him here in a minute. So anyway, appreciate Don checking in with that one. MSU Hunter Spartan says these are the Spartan stats in national field goal percentage. 168th. 3-point percentage is 46th. 3-point scored is 260th. Points total rebounds is 108th. Take all those national stats and wad them up and throw them in the garbage. I think the important stats are what are the stats within the Big Ten after they've played 7 or 8 Big Ten games. Don't compare Michigan State's. Let's go to Paul Konyndyk. Paul, are you there? No. I think he's calling the wrong number. All right. Those percentages. So in 3-point percentage field goal defense or three-point offense nationally, you're comparing Michigan State to St. Peter's. Do you know who St. Peter's played? Or, schools like St. Peter's or William and Mary. I don't care. Colgate. Colgate might be shooting better from 3-point range than Michigan State right now. Do you really think they're better 3-point shooting team than Michigan State? No. It depends on what their schedule is. So national stats. I don't know what's going on here. I'm having trouble here.
Press 2.
Okay, here we go. Got it. Didn't have it plugged in all the way. Paul, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I had a problem. I didn't have the thing all the way plugged in, and then I had some other problems. We got Paul Konyndyk here, ladies and gentlemen. Associate editor, SpartanMag.com. Had some problems with my own, some technical problems earlier, but we've got that straightened out. We're going to talk Michigan State versus Michigan basketball. Konyndyk and I had a VCast on the court at Breslin Center a couple nights ago. You can find that here on the YouTube channel. We talked about Michigan State and Michigan on that night. Since then, Michigan went out and played really well and defeated a good Penn State team at Chrysler Center. So now Michigan has won 2 straight games against Maryland and Penn State. Paul had a chance to watch that game, as a lot of you did, Michigan versus Penn State, as did I. So we've got a little closer look at Michigan as we get ready to break down this game a little bit. Now, Paul, I'm not going to ask you how you're doing because we all know you're doing well, right, Paul?
Yes.
Doing all right?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
All right, man. One of the first things I'm curious about, Jet Howard is a good player for Michigan as a freshman. 6'8", 37% from three-point range. A lot of the offense goes through him. Very good off the drive, very good spot-up shooter. They run a lot of action for him, zoom action, dribble handoff things. He's good at 6'8". He's a wing, he's a face-up 6'8" guy. If you look at Michigan State's roster, the guy physically that's best equipped to play defense against Jet Howard would be Malik Hall. Now, Malik Hall's coming off that injury. He's not back in the starting lineup yet. I've been wondering, and I'm thinking, do you think there's a chance that we might see Malik Hall start in this game? Your thoughts about that? And defense first. Malik Hall, is he the guy that would be guarding Jet Howard? If not, it's probably Akins, maybe A.J. Hogard. Do you see this as an interesting question for Michigan State?
Yeah, I think they've got a couple of interesting questions because I think Michigan has some pieces. I think there's interesting questions on both sides. But, yeah, in my opinion, if Malik Hall is healthy, he's, if Malik Hall is where he was pre-foot injury, then he's the guy that's guarding Jet Howard. I wouldn't be surprised to see Hogard on him because he is a pretty good defender. He has done pretty well. I think they've got a couple of interesting questions because I think Michigan has some pieces because he's got such a strength advantage that he can use his lower body pretty well. We saw that last time out against the Sam Griesel from Nebraska. Now, Jet Howard's a different player, different type of athlete. And the other thing is because you can put Tyson Walker on the point guard and Doug McDaniel. So that's not an issue. I think, I wouldn't expect to see Joey Hauser on him. I mean, although Joey has defended pretty well and he's defended against some guys that have tried to drive him, so it's interesting. I think probably you go with AJ Hogard if Malik Hall's still coming off the bench, and that's a big if. I can't remember how many minutes he played last time out, but it was still right around 20. Correct me if I'm wrong.
What was it, like 12 or 13 against Buffalo? And then I'll look it up right now, but go ahead.
But I think he was around 20 minutes. He wasn't over 20 minutes in my opinion, and he still came off the bench. He was in at about the 5-minute mark. So, what I would think that Michigan State would try Hogard to start with on him and see what happens there. Malik Hall will probably pick him up when he checks in at the 15-minute mark if he doesn't start in this game.
Mm-hmm. I think, Hall is angling toward being ready to play more minutes, obviously. And if it does not happen as a starter, he could actually give them a little bit of a lift off the bench. Not just offensively. I'm not sure if that's all going to be there. But when you can bring in a guy who's 6'8", that has similar size to Jet Howard, and I thought that Malik Hall moved well laterally on defense against Buffalo his first day back. It was a stress reaction in his foot, so you're wondered and worried about the wheels a little bit. But I thought the wheels looked pretty good. Other areas of the game have to still come around. But I think the lateral movement looks okay.
Going back to the Buffalo game, that's something that Buffalo, they do a lot of driving. They do a lot of, they tested him specifically. And I thought the one thing that surprised me, we've seen a lot over the years of guys coming off of foot injuries. I thought he moved as well as I've seen in the guy's first week back from a foot injury, which that tells me that Michigan State was very cautious with the foot injury. It wasn't, like if this was like a clean, straight up break that required surgery, like Akins did, it would have been a lot different. I think Michigan State was fortunate at the timing of when they caught Malik Hall's injury because he moved pretty well, and Buffalo really did go after him. And so that was good to see. You mentioned a minute ago about, maybe Akins being on that guy. I would expect to see Akins on Kobe Buffkin. Those two guys played with each other, when they were with the family. And I think that's a good fit. That's a good matchup. Buffkin's not really a strong guy, but he moves well. He's a crafty left-hander. And I think that Akins, the familiarity that he has with Buffkin's game, having played with him, and I'm sure he's checked him in practice when they were playing AAU ball and stuff like that. I think that's a benefit for Michigan State. It's not always easy to defend a left-hander, and the fact that I think that Akins will be into that. Those guys are in the same class, they're from the same state. And they were the two best players coming out of the state in that class, in my opinion. Pierre Brooks is another guy in the same class, but I've always thought the Aikens were 1A and 1B, Aikens and Buffkin in that recruiting class from in-state kids, and that'll be fun to watch those two go at it on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Hogard has had some really good moments as a defender last year, did real well against Jaden Ivey for Purdue when Michigan State beat Purdue. Hogard, when you really test him and challenge him, has done some good things defensively. Now, can he do that against a Jet Howard who's 6'8", taller? That'd be a different type of challenge for Hogard. And if it doesn't go well, you've got Hall there, and you throw two different guys at him, at Howard, two experienced guys, a junior and a senior. I think it makes perfect sense that initially to have Aikens on Buffkin for the reasons you mentioned, and the reasons you mentioned earlier. Tyson Walker, size-wise, would match up well with Doug McDaniel. Doug McDaniel's quick at 5'10". Tyson Walker's quick. So that only leaves Hogard to guard Howard if those are the three that start. So, Izzo was talking about go ahead.
The one thing I would say with Hogard, he's had some really tough, difficult defensive matchups. I think of Jalen Pickett, for Penn State. That guy's a handful with the way he plays, and I thought Hogard did a really nice job in that matchup. One of the things I think he excels at are dudes that try to drive him. Now, I don't know how much Howard is going to do as far as driving. I think his big threat, especially if people overcommit, to defending Hunter Dickinson, I think Howard's one of his bigger threats is his face-up jumper. And at 6'8", I think Hogard will match up fine with him if he tries to drive him. That jumper, though, Howard's got a quick trigger. He's very confident, and that's maybe a different type of player than Hogard has faced in recent games. But like you said, I think he is the type of dude that he'll be into that matchup and he'll rise to the occasion to the best of his ability.
Mm-hmm. And Andy Secor is mentioning something here. He's chiming in over here in the comments area, and he says, I do think as much as Michigan State switches on the perimeter versus screens, that initial perimeter matches can be a little overrated. I don't think they will have any no-switch rules due to HD responsibilities. I don't know what HD means. But, yeah, I agree with that. When you're switching, everyone guards everybody. But initially and, before screens and so forth, you'll end up with Hogard on Walker or Hall on Walker, 60 or 70% of the time, depending on who the primary is, which is significant. But you're right. After screens and switches, you try to do that to try to get matchups that you want, and Michigan State is switching for in a lot of occasions.
What I would say on that is I just feel like, like Tyson Walker plays, he's not a tall guard. He's like 6'1" at maximum, but he plays, he typically does not get exposed when he plays like guys that are taller than him. Now 6'8" is a different story, but Tyson Walker can hold his own, and he's got some advantages. I mean, he's got really quick hands. This is the one thing that I think really kind of is underrated about Michigan State. And you see more and more now that Malik Hall is back, but to have Jaden Aikens back healthy, the trio of guards with Walker, Aikens, and Hogard, I can't remember Michigan State having a better defensive trio of guards in a long time. And so maybe some of those matchups that you usually get with all the switches maybe won't be as effective. So I think what it comes down to sometimes is like what happens when a guy like Pierre Brooks is on him. I think Michigan State is far beyond where we've seen them in recent years in terms of like backcourt defense, their guard and wing defense. So it comes down to like when teams exploit kind of matchups, it'll be when Pierre Brooks is in the game or someone like that.
Mm-hmm. And Michigan, when they do switches and so forth, when they end up with Doug McDaniel, the freshman 5'10" point guard, who's quick with the ball and does some things. Defensively, he's quick and has steals in the backcourt, but if he gets matched up on Hogard has shown that he likes to take smaller guards down into the paint, back them down, and you've seen Hogard have some success there. I'm not saying that's something that Michigan State can do time after time after time. It's just something you might be able to do 2 or 3 or 4 times and get 5 or 6 or 7, 8 points and a couple fouls. That's significant in a 40-minute game. I think McDaniel can try to guard Tyson Walker and do well in some regards. I think McDaniel and Bufkin are both quick over screens, quick footwork, the way Walker is on defense. But Hogard becoming a guy that can play some bully ball at the point at times when McDaniel switches onto him, that'll be interesting. Because if you're Michigan, you put McDaniel on Walker. But when Walker sits and you've got a backcourt of Akins, Hall, and Hogard, finding someone for McDaniel to guard could become a little bit problematic. When I'm looking at some of the potential weaknesses, Michigan's good, but I think their transition defense is a little bit casual, Paul. I don't know if you noticed that or not. Sometimes they're a little casual about, spotting up and matching up. You know that Michigan, with Howard and the assistant coach from St. Joe's, Phil Martelli, they're going to tell their guys to get back. You got to get back on defense against Michigan State. And I'm sure some of the players will acknowledge that and listen to it. But this will be the first time Doug McDaniel's played against these guys. First time that Bufkin has played this many minutes against these guys. So, and Jet Howard as a 4 pretty much, or he's I guess he's a 3. Is Howard going to get back quickly on Akins? Is he going to get back quickly to his spot? Michigan State's going to try to run. They're not as great running this year as they have been in previous years. Last year, they weren't great running. They've shown spats and spurts of playing good transition ball this year, or at times this year. You know that Michigan State's going to try to hit that accelerator and get something, not only because they want to make progress toward becoming that type of team, but because I suspect they'll look on film and see that Michigan is a team with not a lot of weaknesses, but can get a little casual in transition defense after makes or misses. And Michigan State, with the adrenaline of the home energy and their improved ball movement, extra pass mentality, they share the ball well, getting to spots, and a team that is a good three-point shooting team with Hauser, Walker, Akins. I think that's where Michigan State can try to steal some points there in transition, and Michigan better be ready for it. I know they're going to be talking about it, but whether they can come out and do it, that's a weakness that I see for Michigan that Michigan State potentially can exploit. I think Michigan State will have open shots in transition. Doesn't mean they're going to make them. You can do great things in transition and go 0 for 10 from three-point range in transition opportunities, open transition opportunities, just because that's the way the ball bounces sometimes. But I think Michigan State's going to get some shots in transition, Paul.
Yeah, and one of the things I mentioned in the BCast that we did after the Nebraska game is I think that one of the things that hurts Michigan, and I do think, having watched the last game and watched them since the Central Michigan game, I think they're getting better. I think guys are settling into roles. But I think one of the things that really kind of hurts Michigan this year, and this might show up in the transition defense, is the absence of like a veteran, mindful defender. I think of a guy like Eli Brooks. I think he was so underrated. One of the better defensive players in the Big Ten. He's a guy that hit a lot of clutch shots, and that's what I think sometimes fans remember about a guy. But I think when you look at what he did on defense, it was so underappreciated at times. And not having a guy like that, not only a quality defender, but also a team leader, I think that could hurt. And we've seen, Michigan State, they haven't run the way they want to, but they've got guys that are capable of running. And you think of when they play the 2-point guard thing with Hogard at the 1 and then Tyson Walker at the 2. Walker's a pretty dang quick guy. And, when you have if Madi Sissoko is out there sprinting the court, and Akins is also quick. So, you've got some guys that absolutely can fly, like Michigan State used to have back in the day. Guard quickness is something that Michigan State has had traditionally during the Tom Izzo era, but I think they got away from that the last few years. But it's back now with a vengeance, and I think with Hogard being pretty dang athletic, that's I think he's changed his body a lot. You can see it on defense, but I think he's done a nice job. But the two wings, you look at Akins and Tyson Walker, those guys can fly, and I don't think we've quite seen, like from the Akins part of it, I don't think we've quite seen him get to the point where he can get up the court, get the ball fast enough where he can just drive baseline. We saw him try to do it a couple times against Nebraska, but that's something, as Tyson Walker is also wide open on the wing when he's sprinting. That's going to be an option there as people try to close out on Tyson Walker. You're going to see, Akins be able to turn the corner and play above the rim. Rim running. I said before the Nebraska game, I think that Michigan State bigs, namely Monty Sissoko, has to be able to move, from baseline to baseline. This is another game where that really benefits, him if he can stay out of foul trouble, which is something we'll talk about later. But his role in the transition game, I think, he's another guy. I'm really curious to see where Michigan State goes transition-wise. Like teams like you mentioned, even good defensive teams. I even think like Nebraska last time out. Now, I don't know what the actual transition numbers were. It didn't look like Michigan State did very well transition-wise, but Nebraska was sprinting back all the time. Michigan State still had opportunities to score in transition, whether that was maybe the secondary break, but guys were set up early. Even in like what might be considered a half-court type set, they got down the floor fast enough, and Nebraska really wasn't set up in their half-court defense, and I think Michigan State made them pay. This is not what I would consider like a veteran Michigan defense, and why I think they miss a guy like Brooks is because you do have some limitations, inside with the foot quickness of a dude like Hunter Dickinson. Terrace Reed's just a young dude coming off the bench. I think he's got long-term potential as a defensive player, but he's not quite there yet. Michigan does have some length on defense, but these guys haven't played Michigan State, and it should be interesting to see, if that break can get ramped up a little bit. That's the next thing for Michigan State to get going, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we saw Akins release down that left sideline a couple nights ago, and I mentioned to you when you were sitting next to me, Hogard is usually pretty good at spotting people breaking and getting and forwarding the ball correctly on time and on target. But there's one time when Akins was heading down the sideline, and Hogard got it to him late. I think Akins ended up turning it over, but I thought that turnover was on Hogard for not getting it to him on time. Those things can get adjusted, and those screws can get tightened up for the transition game to become more like a Michigan State traditional transition team that we haven't seen the last couple of years. Akins with the wheels getting back in gear can be a big part of that. You mentioned Sissoko running the middle lane in the Heathcote fast break, something we've not seen from Sissoko much, a little bit here and there. Sometimes Michigan State can employ and deploy aspects of their blueprint sometimes overnight, like it goes from 0 to 120 overnight. Sissoko's got good endurance. If he's running that rim and scores on a dunk once, then Dickinson has to get back, and you can have an impact on Dickinson's field goal percentage by taxing his gas tank. And Michigan State's transition game is one way to do that if you're making it work, and if Sissoko is able to hurt them in transition. And you can say, well, if Dickinson's not the first guy back, you just have somebody else, whether it be Williams or Jet Howard, getting to the nail, getting to the halo, and guard, closing up for him for an instant until Dickinson gets back. But if you do that, you're leaving either Hauser or Akins or Walker open on a wing, and that's when three-pointers start draining. So that's why the whole thing works. All those dominoes go together. So Sissoko being able to rim run, like you said, something we've not seen, but it's a component that I think that possibly is in the chamber and ready to fire, possibly, and they need that to work. All these little things to try to help tax the gas tank of Dickinson.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking transition-wise is, the secondary break and Hauser with that trailer three. That's something that, I think depending on the matchup, but, like Northwestern did its utmost to take Hauser away. I thought Nebraska put a lot of emphasis on that. But there have been times this year where he has been open, for that trailer three. He's been pretty effective at it. And, Michigan had better be ready for that because, it's been a weapon. It's always been a weapon in Big Ten play. And I can't think of a guy, you look at Michigan State's roster and, there's a lot of pieces, but the one guy that I think has been the most consistent all season long is, Joey Hauser, with the exception of the aircraft carrier game. And that's a game that doesn't benefit an outside shooter because of, the wind conditions and whatnot. But Joey Hauser's played he's had a heck of a season thus far. His confidence has been off the charts. He's having fun. And he's a guy that I would look, in past years, I would think with a guy like Joey Hauser, sometimes this is a game where you get tensed up and maybe kind of defeatist with, body language or whatever, but Hauser's playing loose and free. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him hit a couple of threes on the break, as a trailer, maybe even Malik Hall in that role. But that's something to watch as well. Cause I think, I don't think Michigan State's fast break is going to be what we'd ever call vintage. I think it's there. I think there's pieces. I think it has the potential to be effective. And I think this team is different, than other Michigan State teams. The ball movement last time out was pretty dang impressive. Rewatching that Nebraska game, the other night, I was very impressed with how well the ball moved. And, you want to see examples of hockey assists in basketball. There was a bunch of them in that game. And you can see the benefit of the practice, Jim, on Michigan State's offensive operation on their baseline or on their inbounds plays. And all these things that they needed to practice, kind of brought themselves to bear on that game. And it's interesting to see if that'll continue against Michigan, which I expect that to, given the amount of time they've had to prepare for the Wolverines.
It needs to bear itself in this game. And if Hall is a little bit more healthy, you might see Michigan State take more steps toward getting into that midseason form. I think they might be close. The passing, the extra passing, which is part of Michigan State's game plan for the Nebraska opponent, because Nebraska was really aggressive in double teaming the post, so Michigan State didn't even bother going into the post. But Nebraska also pressured the perimeter, and Michigan State shot, fake, dribble, extra pass, make the defense rotate, then extra pass. It was part of the game plan that executed it so well, and it takes veteran guile to make that happen. Now think about these players as veteran passers now. Hogard, Tyson Walker, Joey Hauser, Malik Hall. These are heady passers that see the court well, and you combine the shooting ability of most of those guys, plus Akins as a shooter, and it can be a lot to cover if you're an opponent. Got to hit some shots, but Michigan State's had some games with some open shots. Tyson Walker against Buffalo, they've had some games with open shots that haven't gone down. Akins was red hot going into the Nebraska game. He missed some open shots. Now, as far as other weaknesses for Michigan, Doug McDaniel, good point guard, good future, little guy. He's got that burst of quickness, ability to not only start but stop. Really good job stopping and so forth. But I thought there's a few times that as a point guard, he was kind of not feeding Dickinson enough, not looking for Dickinson enough, not deferring to the big man enough. I suspect they might get that ironed out and do a better job of that going forward. But you get in a close game, you don't want that guy taking shots with 25 on the shot clock when he could get it inside to Dickinson. So I think that's something Michigan needs to work on. Now, Dickinson scored 30-plus or whatever it was last year in Ann Arbor when Michigan handled Michigan State rather easily the last time they played. Dickinson, when he gets it going, he's a load. Everybody knows that. So like you mentioned earlier, and I'm sure you were hinting at it, probably the biggest X-factor variable in this game could be, of course, three-point shooting percentage is so important, but Mady Sissoko staying out of foul trouble. You only get 5 fouls. I mentioned it earlier in the show that Sissoko could have been whistled for 2 early in that Nebraska game if it had been a quick whistle. If it's a quick whistle on this game and he gets in foul trouble, the drop-off in terms of defensive capabilities against someone like Dickinson becomes a drastic problem immediately. Jackson Kohler's a freshman. He's going to have a hard time with Dickinson. Same thing with Carson. If Michigan State wanted to go smaller with Hauser and Hall, they could try to survive with that, but it's not advisable. So it's so important for Sissoko to play as well as he did against Shibwe, as well as he did against Timmy of Gonzaga, and have that kind of night without getting in foul trouble. That'd be a huge step toward Michigan State being on course to do what they need to do in this game. But if he gets in foul trouble, big problems. Your sense on how this is going to work for Dickinson offensively in this game?
Well, yeah, that's a big question, and I'm writing a 3 things to watch thing, before we did this, and one of the things and I was just writing about the matchup between Mady and Hunter Dickinson, and one of the things that strikes me is that Michigan State has had issues. Like, they've had times in the past when they've had Michigan bigs that have been effective, but it's been like the problem with Hunter Dickinson is you can't fall for the WWE, WWF wrestling heel kind of aspect of the game. So I think Izzo alluded to it earlier today, where Marty is a pretty even-keeled dude, a level-headed dude, and I think that his mentality is going to serve him well in this game, because I don't think he'll get caught up in the three-ring circus that is Hunter Dickinson. That I think really can sometimes derail other guys. Like, I'm thinking if a Nick Ward was playing in this game, it would become about him and Hunter Dickinson and all that petty type stuff. Marty is more like he's just a different type of guy, and I don't think he'll engage at that level. But I think that Michigan State can't. They've got to be smart with how they play. And one of the things I'm going to write every single time Michigan State plays a top flight center, a scorer like Hunter Dickinson, and they played several of them this year, is like the key is going to be for Marty to stay out of foul trouble. Now, he has done overall a pretty good job when he's gone up against dudes like Timmy and Ashibwe, but he can't get cheap ones, right? So I think that, the one thing that he can't do is he can't get offensive fouls or anything like that. And he's got to play good position defense, but he can't put two hands on Hunter Dickinson. I think you mentioned the last game that Dickinson played against Michigan State, and he put up 33 in that game. Well, that's all well and good. He put up 25 in the game before that, the one at Michigan State, where Michigan State won pretty comfortably by 13. They should have won by more, but he put up 25 in that game, and that's okay as long as you're making his shots difficult and defending without fouling and doing what you can to kind of limit his effectiveness in the post. What you don't want to get into is a situation where you have to put too many defensive resources to stopping one guy, and that leaves other guys open. And I think when I go look at what happened against Penn State, what happened with Penn State's got a center that is a true freshman, a sushi raw dude that's the big weakness that they've got. That's an all guard team with a center that should be redshirting. I know redshirting doesn't happen anymore, but he's a dude that should redshirt. And that was a real problem for Penn State. They tried to help out in different ways. And that ball did a nice job moving out of the post to open shooters. And Michigan State can't let that happen. Mady Sissoko has got to defend well, one-on-one against Hunter Dickinson without fouling, because if you can do that, you can spot him as 20 points. But what you don't want is you don't want guys like Joey Baker coming off the bench and draining 3 or 4 threes, which he's more than capable of. And that's kind of in a lot of the stuff that we saw in that last game. Jet Howard with some of his perimeter scoring. A lot of this stuff came on pretty good passes where Penn State was. Lost track of him because they were worried about Dickinson, and that's something that Michigan State can't let happen. And Tom Izzo's typically been willing to allow top flight scoring big men to get theirs as long as he's not giving up wide open threes. And I think you'll see a lot of the same this weekend. Maybe a little bit of helping out with digging. Michigan State's got fast guards; they should be able to get back. But you can give up 20. That's fine to Hunter Dickinson. I know Michigan State fans don't. The guy's a tool. You want to shut him down, but you'd rather win the game, and Michigan State's always been pretty smart that way.
Yeah, Michigan State will look to dig and help off of people that are not as good as shooters. When Terrence Williams is in there, 31% three-point shooter, made a couple threes against Penn State, but that's the guy you sag off of if you can. McDaniel, 33% from three-point range, kind of has a funny-looking shot. You take your chances with him. Buffkin is a 33% shooter this year. Maybe you make him prove
he's
it.
a good shooter. He is a good shooter. I really think he is. I'd let Doug McDaniel shoot. Now we've seen examples of guys like Xavier Simpson, who wasn't a good 3-point shooter, making a ton, and that always sometimes happens in rivalry games. But the guys you don't want shooting uncontested threes are Jace Howard, or not Jace Howard, but
Jet Howard,
the starting Howard, and then Jet Howard, and then also Joey Baker coming off the bench, the Duke transfer. I know he's only averaging 5 points a game, but he had 3 3-pointers against Penn State, and he is a guy at 6'9", 6'10" that can. Those are the kind of guys that sometimes beat you in a game like this.
Mm-hmm. And he was a good percentage. He was a good percentage shooter at Duke too. That's not really a fluke. I mean, he's capable of coming in and making an impact. Terrence Williams is a guy that I think is going to have some open shots. And if he makes a couple of three-pointers, that's kind of like that Xavier Simpson effect and impact. If he's making a couple shots, that puts Michigan, ahead of the curve and shooting below par golf and getting more out of somebody that maybe he's capable of doing. And Michigan State might make him prove that. So Williams is the guy you sag off of a little bit here and there when the angles call for it in order to help with Dickinson. He's not always in position in a place where you can help off of, but when he is, you have to be aware of that. And Doug McDaniel too. So, I mean, Michigan State's going to be sending Diggs, and Michigan State's not a team that's double-teamed a lot, but I think they'll flash some double teams here and there. Izzo said today they'll throw people at him, and I think that's what they'll do. They won't play him defensively the same time every time down. Penn State, it seemed like, flashed double teams at him when he went to the dribble. He gets it in the post. They're off. He's kind of probing and positioning, and then when he puts it on the deck, then the double team came. He still did his damage, and he's going to do some damage. You can limit that damage, like I said earlier, if you make him work defensively without the ball. Not only getting back in transition, but getting him involved with ball screen defense. In Michigan State, when they've played him or other bigs that they've had over the years, especially like Dickinson, who's not real quick in terms of getting out to trap a ball screen or stay level with it, he's going to drop. He's going to play drop coverage. So if you have a good ball screen there, the point guard's got a chance to turn the corner and get to the get to the foul line area and get open 15-footers, as long as you don't waste a lot of time, because Dickinson is mindful of that, and he knows it's drop coverage. He knows that that's a window of opportunity, and he tries to anticipate it, and with his huge 7'1" frame, tries to get out. And even though it's drop coverage, he tries to make up for it by anticipating it and getting to the shot window. So is that where shot fake and extra shot pass comes in? Maybe. But whether it's a point guard or a wing guard like Akins, ball screen, turn the corner, pull up, those should be there for Michigan State. That doesn't mean they're going to be going in, but that's one thing you have to do against Michigan, because they do give you some open windows, because one of weaknesses of Dickinson is he's so big that he's immobile, so ball screen defense leaves some shot windows open, and Michigan State needs to hit those. And also the way you run him in the half court to make him get out there onto those ball screens, even though he's not jumping out aggressively, he still has to cover some ground there. One difference for Michigan this year is that, Reed came in and played pretty well against Penn State, played like 5 straight minutes in the first half. That helps Dickinson a lot. He's got a pretty good backup there who's not a stiff. He's not a guy that's just going to come in and give hollow minutes. Reed's a guy that can finish on some things and provide them with some things. So it's a pretty good Michigan team. Michigan State's going to play well to win. Anything else, Paul?
Yeah, I would say this one thing about Terry. I will reiterate that Penn State's front court, their center, it's a mess. So it doesn't surprise me that Reed, and I like Reed as a player. I liked Reed as a player coming in. It doesn't surprise me that he would have some success. I'm not sure what to think about a guy like Jackson Kohler in this game. I'd expect him to kind of struggle, but he needs to be able to give Michigan State some minutes, as does Carson Cooper. I think one of the things we're starting to see this time of year is Michigan State has had some good play from some backups that have played more minutes than maybe we anticipated they played because of injuries, and those guys need to continue to play well, coming off the bench. And the other thing I would say about the mid-range game and those jumpers, it's a lot easier to do that kind of stuff when you're used to doing it. Michigan State's played in a lot of these with when there's drop coverage, when you play against teams that shack ball screens. Michigan State has all their guards are very adept at hitting or at that mid-range jumper from the elbow area up above the free throw line, that 17-footer or 15-footer. So it's not like you're asking someone to reinvent the wheel. If it's there, these guys are going to be able to shoot that with confidence. Hogard has done that pretty well at times. Tyson Walker, he can really fill it up when he's feeling it. I think he's feeling good about himself. I think the big benefit from that game against Nebraska is Tyson Walker feels good about his jumper again. And that's a good thing for Michigan State coming in this game.
And both teams are very good with baseline inbound plays. Michigan State was very good against Nebraska getting open shots. They missed them, but really good execution, get open shots. And Dickinson is a really good screener on baseline inbound plays. Michigan is good with baseline inbound plays too. Michigan, very good in terms of take care of the ball. Very few turnovers. So Michigan State needs to make sure that they don't allow a big discrepancy in turnovers. They can't forfeit a 14-4 turnover disadvantage, because that leads to fewer shot attempts, and that's a good way to get beat. So it's going to be interesting. I think Michigan State is due to take another step and play some good basketball, and they're going to need to against a good Michigan team. And we appreciate Paul Konyndyk here to help talk about it and break it down. Go to SpartanMag.com for Paul Konyndy's coverage. He will have 3 things to watch for this game over at SpartanMag. We'll have coverage throughout the week and heading into the game and post-game for all your Michigan State basketball coverage, SpartanMag.com. Anything else, Paul?
Nope.
Appreciate it, Paul. There he goes. Paul Konyndyk, associate editor, SpartanMag.com. Does a great job. Appreciate him chiming in. Appreciate all the comments over here in the comment section. Let's go over here and take a look at what's going on in the comment section. Got any questions? Delvon Rowe, commitment day was great. Yeah, that was a surprise. And if I remember right, that was right around the time, might have been the same day as Michigan State's parade after winning the national championship at hockey. I think it was that same day. So yeah, that was a good day. Good call, Marlo, in terms of some of the great moments in SpartanMag.com Underground Bunker message board lore. That was a surprise. Desert Spartan says his top Spartan Mag Underground Bunker moment was beating Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship game in Indianapolis 2013. Appreciate Don Strait and all his support. Mr. Bowman says, thank you, Elijah Collins, for your services. I wish it could have worked out. I think he's talking about Elijah Collins. F. Panandero says, what do you think about the 3-3-5? I found it interesting where the linebackers got a running start at hitting the gaps. Appreciate your post. I was just talking about that. You might have heard me talking about that before seeing your post. There's a different way of doing things, and it's pretty good. And the running start is okay as long as you can undress somebody like that. It seems there should be good counters to that. I don't know what they are, but running start at the linebacker position, I mean, that's the way people played in the 60s when an offensive lineman had to pass protect like this and nobody could throw downfield and corners could bump and run all the way to the goal line. If you go back and look at film of Michigan State's 1965-66 team, those teams that held everybody to negative yards rushing, I mean, everybody was allowed to play that way, but just 8 guys, they called a gap 8 back then, I don't know what it's called, but they just converged toward the backfield and there's just no stopping them. Anyway, no driftless area in the driftless area is southwest of me. I'm 30 minutes north of the Wisconsin Dells. MSU Hunter, I was asking him if he's in the driftless area of Wisconsin. People first asking about Harbaugh. Stroker says, Joker, Hunter Dickinson. Joker, Stroker. Stroker, he's a good man. Appreciate Stroker chiming in from Chicagoland. Clark Marrier says, looking forward to a Spartan victory this weekend. Marlo says, hey, Bruce, all good this way. Lemon Zest says, Booty Hole is a good shooter. I don't know what that means. Purdue beat Ohio State. That was on the road, right? So Purdue is not shooting real well from three-point range. They're like 13th in the Big Ten in three-point percentage. You always think about Purdue being a really good shooting team. Not this year, not so much. Fletcher Lawyer is a good shooter, going to be a good shooter. But they do not have your usual collection of Matt Painter, Indiana, Hoosier State style Boilermaker shooters. Wisconsin's been winning a lot, but man, Wisconsin's played a lot of close games. Rutgers keeps winning in impressive fashion. That team is for real. Hayden Vischer, CJ McCollum from Lehigh, thank you. Rutgers beat Maryland by 14. Mark Burton says, what have you heard about Michigan being under investigation? I've not heard anything. Apparently, some practice infractions. There might have been some recruiting visits, not practice infractions, but recruiting visits during the COVID shutdown, which is what Arizona State did. If they do what Arizona State did, that could get ugly. Is that further reason for Harbaugh to want to leave? I don't know. All this smoke about Harbaugh leaving, I'll believe it when I see it. I mentioned that on the board the other day also. Usually when a coach is going to leave, you don't hear about it ahead of time. Usually when a coach leaves, it's like when Brian Kelly left Notre Dame for LSU. It comes out of nowhere. Lincoln Riley to USC. If it's something of that magnitude and that level. Usually if you hear about it ahead of time, it's just agents putting it out there to get people to panic to get their client more money. However, with Harbaugh, we've seen a couple times when his moves have been telegraphed. For instance, when he left the 49ers to go to Michigan, everybody knew that was happening. So he's an outlier in that regard. Last year when he interviewed with the Vikings, everybody knew about it. and apparently he would have taken that job if offered. So usually when a coach leaves, it's like a thief in the night. You don't get these type of warnings, except for Harbaugh. So that's a 50-50 deal. It's hard for me to call on that one. J.J. McKay, 6-man-1, says, good evening, Comp, from the great white north, Keweenaw County, top of Michigan. Glad to see you on tonight. Keweenaw, Copper Harbor, way up in there. J.J. McKay. Wonder how much snow they have up there. I know they had like 30 inches in Gaylord, which is the high point of lower Michigan, snow belt. But my buddy Della Piazza tells me they're down to about like 7 inches now. A lot of it's melted off. He was singing the snow blues a couple weeks ago. I want more snow here in East Lansing. We had some nice snow, white Christmas, all that stuff. Got the snowblower running real good. Now it's like raining, and we had some snow flurries tonight, but it's January. I want snow. Andy Secor, we got to him earlier. Scott Jackson wants to know some Harbaugh. And then Al Montgomery says, this is a green and white channel. Don't care about Harbaugh. Andy Secor says, I would play Hauser at the backup 5 before Kohler or Cooper. None of the 3 can really guard Dickinson, and at least with Hauser in, Hunter would need to guard him on the other end. Great point by Andy. Andy Secor, a great shooting coach. I think he was a high school varsity coach in West Michigan. I think Cedar Springs. Secor knows his basketball. We really appreciate him posting and offering some insights. That's true. And Andy, you may have seen Michigan State has run a little bit of 5-out offense. A little bit. Just a little bit here and there. Do they spring that on Michigan a little bit? Michigan had trouble with zone against Central Michigan. Michigan State's done a little bit of that this year. Do they spring that? I don't know. Michigan State's a little more varied than they've been in the past. Izzo, by and large, wants to do what he does and do it well, but he's got a few more cards in his hand. But it's a good point about Hauser. You know, Hauser against Dickinson. Didn't Hauser have to guard Edey a little bit last year out of an emergency, and he fronted a lot and did all that he could. Hauser was 10 pounds heavier then. Hauser's quicker now, but not as strong, theoretically. So, but you raise a good point. You know, they'll try Kohler against Dickinson, but if it doesn't go well, I don't disagree with you that Hauser might be the choice there. C-Dog says Michigan under NCAA investigation, according to the Detroit News. Interesting that that's coming to the forefront right now. J.J. McKay, 6-man-1, says, ha, we would be happy to send some your way, Comp. We've had 325 inches last winter of snow. Yeah, I don't need that much, and I don't need winter beginning on November 10th and lasting until April 20th. I like winter to be January and February. And I like real winter, and I want the pond to freeze for skating and some ice fishing. And I want snow for cross-country skiing. Maybe getting up north a little bit to throw on the skis and look like a fool going down the little hills here and there. That's what I want. And then by about NCAA tournament time, I want the thaw to be in full effect. Get out and throw the ball around a little bit. 2 months of real winter, that's all I'm asking. And for me, that's perfect. White Christmas, January, February, boom. Who do I need to call about that? Al Montgomery says, do we think Nick Sanders or Steve Smith's son will be any good? Nah, they're walk-ons. You know, Davis Smith could play in the MAC. I've not seen Nick Sanders play a lot. I've gone to practice. I've not seen him. He's supposed to be a good shooter. They all like him. He's a nice kid and all, but I've really not seen him play much. J.J. McKay, 6-man-1, says, we had 47 inches of snow in the blizzard between Christmas and New Year's Day. 47 inches of snow. I've heard about that. I've got to say, I love the UP, but I've never been up there in the winter. I thought I was going to get up there for a hockey tournament last year, but it didn't happen. One of these days, I'm going to get up there for the winter and get in the middle of it. I had a sister that went to Michigan Tech, and I meant to get up there back then and never did. But I'm gonna do that. But I really don't know I don't know what it's like. I hear about 40 inches of snow on the ground and things like that, but I've never seen it. I need to do that. Thanks to you guys for posting over there. Let's go back over here to the mailbag. Question 6, Mile High from Golden, Colorado says, Jim, thanks for all you do and Happy New Year. He says, are there any 2023 football recruits you expect Michigan State to add what positions are still being targeted. Offensive line still being targeted, and they're looking around safety a little bit, maybe safety in the transfer portal. But I'm sure you're aware that Michigan State offered a scholarship to an offensive lineman, Chimdi Ono, from Dundalk, Maryland, 6'6", 270. Kind of a late riser. He was committed to Old Dominion, had a really good senior year, has had some other schools come in strong for him, big-time schools, so he decommitted, did not sign in December. He's going to sign in February. In the meantime, he visited Rutgers in December. He's going to visit Michigan State, January 20th. He's going to visit Penn State January 13th and Mississippi January 27th. So Michigan State's in there with him. He's ranked number 6 in Maryland by On3, number 10 in Maryland in the On3 consensus. Those are two different things. On3 does their rankings. Rivals.com does theirs. 24/7 does theirs. I don't know if ESPN counts or not for the consensus. I should know that, but I don't. So On3 has their rankings, and then they mix them all together for the On3 consensus. So On3 has him number 6, but consensus, he's number 10. Anyway, he's a late bloomer, coming on strong, 6'6", 270. Michigan State offered him. They'll be having him in for a visit. Michigan State's got room for an offensive lineman. Other than that, a little bit in the portal. We'll see where they go from there. Question 7, PGM. This is an interesting one from Parts Unknown. He says, does Marco Coleman leaving hurt Michigan State's chances with David Stone? Does Marco Coleman leaving hurt Michigan State's chances with David Stone? David Stone, big-time defensive tackle, 2024. Top 20 player in the country type of guy. And does it hurt Michigan State? Yes, it does. And you said, you posted that you think that his Twitter activity makes you think so. I don't know what he said on Twitter, but I know Jason Killip has spoken with David Stone. David Stone is highly ranked. He's at Florida IMG Academy, 6'4", 255 defensive tackle, ranked one of the top defensive linemen in the country, like top 1 or 2. He's a national top 25 guy. Michigan State was right there to get him, and he was, even kind of a silent, I don't want to say silent commitment to Michigan State, but really good indications for Michigan State on this one. And does Coleman moving on hurt Michigan State? Yes, it does. So Michigan State needs to get Brandon Jordan more involved, Vickerson more involved, and try to save that one. But yeah, Michigan State's chances dropped. Should I say significantly? David Stone I thought was like an 80% Michigan State type of guy. Others were saying 90. I was going to say 75, see when I believe it. Now I take it down to 50, maybe 33. Or 50, and then field. So yes, it does hurt. Question 8, Desert Green from Cave Creek, Arizona says, how is membership going for you with On3? Anything we can do to help? Thank you for asking, Desert Green. Membership's going really well. High percentage of Michigan State SpartanMag.com subscribers have migrated over to the On3 platform, On3 site. We're really excited about that. And we're excited about, we've changed our energy a little bit on some things. I think you may have noticed that. And we're excited about it, and we want to keep trudging forward. We appreciate all the support that people like you give. So everyone give us a thumbs up here. Go to SpartanMag.com. $1, you can become a Magger, and it'll carry you all the way through August 31st. Give us a try. $1, become a Magger. Sherlock in Sterling Heights says, how do I rate Scotty Hazelton? Should Mel Tucker be looking for an upgrade here? I would love to see Michigan State get back to the defense of that 2013 season. 10 years ago, he says, already. Wow. Keep up the good work, Jim. That's what Sherlock says. Hazelton, last year with all the injuries, it's hard to grade him. Defense was not great. Year before that, not great. Different types of not great. Did a good job piecing it together to beat Illinois. Good job piecing it together to beat Wisconsin. Not a bad job piecing it together to hang in there against Michigan. Not so good against Rutgers and Indiana. Kind of fell apart a little bit. Not all on the defensive. You have Kajid Majid in there, walk-on, fourth-string safety, giving up a play at a key moment against Penn State. But defensively this year, I was talking to somebody about this earlier this week, and I won't need to mention his name. He can mention it at some point. But on the bunker or something. But I think Michigan State's got good pieces on defense for 2023. I like the D-line. I like the linebackers coming back. Jacoby Windman coming back, Brule, Halliday. And then in the middle, you've got Simeon Barrows, a plus defensive tackle. Derek Harmon's going to become a plus defensive tackle, I think. Maverick Hansen's a good, solid veteran backup defensive tackle, at least. You got Jackson coming in from Florida State. See what he is. Dre Butler coming in from Liberty. We'll see what he is. I think either one of those guys could be a number 4 defensive tackle. Jackson has the potential to be better than that, but is he going to be better than Maverick Hansen? I don't know. Maverick Hansen is steady. You know what you're going to get. Not sure what we'll get with Jackson. He was okay in some film that I saw. I don't know. Don't expect the world there, but might be all right. But defensive tackles are going to be good. Defensive ends, you got Bogle, you got Pietrowski. Zion Young's going to take a step. He's going to be good. You got Tunmise coming in from A&M, going to play some jumbo defensive end. I think he's got something. I think defensive line's good. I think the front 6 is good. At nickel, Angelo Gross, good against the run. Still needs to grow up against the pass. I think he's okay in the short area, somewhat against the pass. Got to keep him on the same page. Chester Kimbrough's okay against the pass there in the nickel. Corners, Dylan Tatum. Is he the guy with Chuck Brantley? Brantley's got to stay healthy. And then you got the 2 young safeties. They're going to miss Xavier Henderson, but Mangum and Malik Spencer, they got what it takes back there at safety. I think they've got a good defensive 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And if they're not good this year, I don't know what excuses Hazleton can have. I know Tucker's been impressed with Hazleton, working with him in a lot of ways. The injury thing, I don't want to judge Hazleton on the injury thing this past season, but we'll see what happens in the weeks ahead, head into next year. Question number 11, Mike from Battle Creek, or as he says, Cereal City. He says, what's my early prediction on Michigan State's 2023 record? He says it's a very difficult schedule on paper. At Iowa, at Minnesota are no locks. He says you have you've got Washington and a revamped Nebraska coming to Spartan Stadium, plus the big 3 of Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. Well, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Washington, I think there's a good chance all 4 of those are going to be preseason top 10. After Monday, national championship game is being played, and then Tuesday you're going to start to see extra, way too early top 25s. Good gosh. I thought that might happen. My green screen came down. That means we got to sign off. Otherwise, the whole continent might fall off. We don't want that to happen. I got to go, everybody. I got to put this back together. Appreciate everybody checking in. SpartanMag.com. The hook didn't work, man. We'll see you next time. Thanks for everything. Take care.